ケリーはさ、どんな大人になりたいの?
What does being a hero mean? How much are you willing to sacrifice just to achieve your goals? These are the questions that jump into my mind whenever I think of this series. Fate Zero stands as one of my favorite pieces of fiction ever made, telling a dark and brutal story about legendary heroes and villains that ultimately leads to a great tragedy. It has such an intense and foreboding atmosphere throughout, presenting nihilistic themes of the cruelty of war and human nature in itself. There's only one character in the series that I feel perfectly captures all the ideas Fate Zero is trying to convey, and that is none other than Emiya Kiritsugu. For me, he is by far the best written character out of anyone in the cast, and his journey throughout the series is not only tragic, but deeply captivating and complex. Kiritsugu is such a flawed, multifaceted character that I feel discussions surrounding him don't do him enough justice, as people simply label him as having a utilitarian ideology when it's so much more nuanced than that. In this video, I hope to give an in-depth analysis about what makes his character so well written by understanding his nuanced motivations and ideals and how they clash with the other characters, while finally tying it all up and uncovering the core messages of his character. From the moment the show begins, the opening scene subtly illustrates what kind of person Kiritsugu is and the immense burden he carries on his lone shoulders. It opens with his wife having just given birth to their daughter, a scene that would normally incite happiness and celebration, but yet we see the exact opposite. The framing tells us that Kiritsugu is a man in solitude, completely devoid of any positive emotions, as he laments to himself that he will be the cause of his wife's death. He thinks of himself as unworthy to hold his newborn daughter, and this speaks volumes for his character, as he believes himself to be undeserving of any kind of happiness. With her gentle and compassionate voice, Irisfield comforts him, saying that he does deserve happiness because he's the only one who had given her life meaning. This scene is already very telling of the kind of story Fate Zero is heading towards, and the struggles and tragedies that await the characters. Initially, Kiritsugu may be presented to the audience as a cold, calculating, and emotionless machine, only caring about achieving his end goal. However, throughout the Holy Grail War, his outward dispassion to the world around him begins to crumble as he slowly realizes the impending doom he has placed on the people he cares for. During episode 7, in the midst of the Holy Grail War, Kiritsugu contemplates on abandoning everything behind and starting a new life with his wife and daughter. In this moment, we're shown how vulnerable Kiritsugu actually is, and that he's scared to lose the people closest to him. He opens up to Irisfield, laying bare all his pent-up emotions. It's a drastic difference in character from what we've been shown up until now, and adds an extra layer of depth to his motivation. We've been told that the reason Kiritsugu wants to attain the Holy Grail is to give humanity salvation by ending all wars and human conflict. However, that is the lie he habitually tells himself. Kiritsugu isn't as selfless as we think. His utilitarian ideology is often brought up by many in discussions as a means to explain his core actions and motivations throughout the series, though I personally think this to be a surface level understanding of his character, which I'll further explain in detail later on. In order for me to analyze the inner workings of what makes Kiritsugu's character tick, I think first examining his relationship and clash of ideologies with Saber can help further understand the underlying ethos of his character. Throughout the entirety of the series, Kiritsugu and Saber are always presented with conflicting ideologies. One is a noble, heroic spirit who prides herself with honor, dignity, and one who believes in chivalry to exist on the battlefield. The other is a lone, tortured soul who has experienced enough suffering to realize the cruelty of war that humanity has bestowed on itself throughout human history, and so takes it upon himself to be responsible for humanity's salvation. When put together side by side, it's obvious why the two characters would always be at odds with each other. During the summoning of Saber, you can feel that there's a very palpable sense of tension between Kiritsugu and the heroic spirit. Not only do they not have matching personalities, but from the moment she appears, Kiritsugu never treats her as an equal. He never so much acknowledges her existence, but views Saber merely as a tool to use at his disposal when it suits him. Kiritsugu and Saber do not stand eye to eye, and this is due to an initial dispute between the two that stems from Saber's origins and her sense of duty for her country. As a young girl, Saber had already resigned her fate to lead and be the King of England regardless of any personal feelings she might have had. Saber not only saw it as her responsibility, but as a destiny she needed to fulfill. While this can be seen as a noble cause, Kiritsugu thinks differently. He thinks that a young girl's destiny shouldn't have been decided or forced by the world around her. However, by doing so, it's almost as if God had subjected her to a cruel fate she never asked for, unjustly taking away a girl's childhood and innocence in exchange for some sense of duty. In the Banquet of Kings, we learn the motivations behind Saber and that she desires to win the Holy Grail in order to save Britain from destruction and seek salvation for her people. It's a noble and selfless cause from her perspective, but from the outside, she's seen by Ryder as a martyr for her country, a slave to her beliefs. Ryder confidently argues that kings are not the ones to make sacrifices for their people, but the other way around. Kings are meant to lead by example and inspire those to be just like him. The way in which Saber lived her life was a cold, lonely path that no one would want to follow. Saber might have saved her people, but she did not lead them, and look what happened to her empire. Saber regrets the decisions she took in life, while Ryder stands proudly as the king of conquerors. Compared to him, Saber is but a naive little girl chained by her ideals.
故に貴様は生粋の王ではない。己のためではなく、人のための王という偶像に縛られていただけの小娘に過ぎん。
Episode 16 of Fate Zero still remains one of the greatest anime episodes I've ever seen till this day. Firstly, it presents to us just how cold, calculating Kiritsugu can be, and how ruthless his methods of killing are. Without the proper context behind his actions and motivations, he could easily be seen as overly sadistic, but we'll find out later that this isn't the case. Upon getting Aleczanxr to commit a brutal suicide, thus ending the chivalrous duel between him and Saber, Kiritsugu indirectly kills both Kenneth and his wife in cold blood after they had relinquished their participation in the war. This act of merciless and cowardly killing spurs a confrontation between Saber and Kiritsugu as their ideologies come head to head. Saber views the world from an overtly idealistic and romanticized point of view, believing with all her might that a code of honor must exist on the battlefield. Otherwise, every human conflict would rain hell upon this earth. It's reasonable why she would believe this, as killing without pride or honor would mean humans to be nothing but crazed animals. Kiritsugu, however, refutes the idea of having honor on the battlefield, positing that war in itself is hell. Humans are doomed to repeat history time and time again. The tales of heroism in the past, no matter how inspiring, glorified, or romanticized they are, always lead to the death and suffering of people foolish enough to chase that unattainable dream. Many people seem to point towards this scene as evidence of Saber and Kiritsugu being polar opposites of one another. I, however, don't think this to be the case. In fact, this scene, if anything, reinforces the idea of how similar they are and how they are two sides of the same coin. While they have clashing ideologies, they both are too blind to see how much of a slave they are to their own ideals, which ultimately leads to their own tragedies. What's truly great about this scene is that neither perspective is outright presented to be the correct one, and that both ideals have a handful of truths that neither character wants to acknowledge. Both Saber and Kiritsugu truly believe they are in the right and even foresee each other's tragedy. A knight's code of honor cannot save the world when they pretend that there are right and wrong ways to fight. Humans are too selfish to abide by a code of honor on the battlefield, as there is simply too much evil and suffering happening around the world. It's in human nature to do whatever it takes to survive. Therefore, ingrained in humanity itself is cruelty, something Kiritsugu has come to realize. Likewise, however, if you believe the world to be only a place full of cruelty and suffering, you'll slowly become desensitized and wallow in a pit of despair with no light at the end of the tunnel. Saber sees through Kiritsugu's jaded demeanor, speculating that he did once believe in the same ideals that she did, but was struck and betrayed by an unforgiving event that forever changed him.
キリツグ、分かっているのか。悪を憎んで悪をなすなら、その怒りと憎しみがまた新たな戦いを呼ぶだろう。エミヤ・キリツグ、かつてあなたが何に裏切られ、何に絶望したのかは知らない。だがその怒りは、嘆きは、紛れもなく正義を求めた者だけが抱くものだ。キリツグ、若き日の本当のあなたは正義の味方になりたかったはずだ。 世界を救う英雄を誰よりも信じて求め欲していたはずだ。違うか。
From a young age, Kiritsugu was filled with a naive optimism about the world. He dreamt of becoming a hero that would one day save the world, and it was Shirley who saw that potential in him when no one else did. Shirley was the catalyst that caused Kiritsugu's transformation, and his promise to her to become a hero is the driving force behind his actions. When he found out that his father was the cause of the outbreak in the village and that he shows no remorse for his actions, Kiritsugu took it upon himself to take responsibility and rid evil off from this earth, no matter the personal cost. He had already failed once by not putting Shirley out of her misery, which inadvertently caused the whole village's destruction. This is the start of his utilitarian ideology, one that would forever haunt and cause him great pain. However, I also think that this is the most misunderstood part of Kiritsugu's fundamental motivation. He didn't develop a utilitarian ideology because of some sense of justice, he did it because he made a promise to a friend. Kiritsugu feels that his inaction to save Shirley is what ultimately causes the downfall of the entire village. He's burdened by the weight of Shirley's death and so feels personally responsible to kill his own father. He leaves the island with Natalia, choosing to take nothing with him except for the memory he had of Shirley. In the coming years, Kiritsugu forms a mother and son bond with Natalia, who slowly and strictly teaches him about the work of a mercenary and the nature of human conflict. It's impossible to save everyone, no matter how hard you try. You'd have to kill every evil person on this earth just to achieve it, as Natalia jokingly says. But Kiritsugu doesn't mind this. If he has to take on every single sin to achieve this, he will. And he gets the chance to prove this during a mission that goes horribly wrong. Kiritsugu is once again faced with a similar dilemma from his past, in which he has to shoot down a plane with Natalia inside or risk having an entire country's population die. It's a gut-wrenching and emotional scene, but Kiritsugu knows what he must do. He pulls the trigger and fires. All that time spent with Natalia, being raised and taught like he was her own son, gone in an instant. What was it for? Some greater sense of nobility? All that's left is his lonely set of ideals. Ideals that will continue to haunt him for the rest of his life. This breaks down Kiritsugu as he drowns in a pit of guilt, regret, and sadness. He calls out a name, but it's not Natalia, it's Shirley. And it's that line that unfolds the crux of Kiritsugu's core beliefs. It wasn't about a duty or sense of justice, but a promise. A promise he couldn't keep when he was younger and so tries to make up for it. But it's never enough. From this point in his life, Kiritsugu tries to forsake all of his emotions and shoulder the burden of all his past sins. He believes that all the pain and suffering he carries throughout his life will one day be liberated from obtaining humanity's salvation. What makes Kiritsugu's life even more miserable is that, try as he might, deep down, he is not an emotionless machine as people like to believe he is. He needs a form of companionship. Someone that understands or at least accepts all the terrible things he's done. Someone to tell him that everything he did throughout his life was the right thing to do. Shirley, Natalia, Irisfield, and even Maya were pillars of support he needed to convince himself that all the actions he took were for the greater good. Thus, we reach the most climactic moment in Fate Zero, where Kiritsugu rejects the Grail after everything he's been through. He learns that the Grail is tainted, as it can only grant wishes via methods only the wisher knows. The Grail's only solution it offers for Kiritsugu's wish for humanity's salvation is to kill every person in the world and have him live out his life with his wife and daughter peacefully for all eternity. This comes as an absolute shock for Kiritsugu, as the only way the Grail can save everyone is to kill everyone. Kiritsugu refuses the Grail as he didn't come this far from sacrificing the people he loved, only to sacrifice even more. It's this moment in the ending where I believe Kiritsugu to truly become a tragic hero. He makes yet another hard sacrifice by giving up the opportunity to live peacefully with his wife and daughter in order to save billions of people. But in doing so, gives up his final chance to achieve his dreams that he'd been working towards his entire life, for nothing in return. Labeling this as a tragedy would be a cruel understatement. As Kiritsugu denies the Grail, Fuyuki City bursts into flames, destroying anything and everything in its path. After all the trials and tribulations that Kiritsugu had been through, The meaningless violence he had tried to stop ends up happening once again. This completely breaks him as he tries to cling on to the last of his humanity. If he could find someone, just one person to save, he would have saved himself. Everything wouldn't have been pointless. And it's in that moment where he saves a young boy, thereby saving himself from endless suffering. The story of Kiritsugu is an emotionally gut-wrenching tale that conveys to us how putting so much faith into your ideals will lead to your inevitable tragedy. He truly believed in his ideals and was willing to do anything to accomplish his dreams, but yet was blinded by his subconscious act of wanting to become a hero that he never even considered the possibility of the Grail being tainted. Kiritsugu's over-reliance on his beliefs is the catalyst for his downfall as he fails to perceive and understand different perspectives. Kiritsugu is deluded in his ideals, much like a lot of the other tragic characters, except in his case, he's already accepted the cruel reality of this world, but still believes that the Grail can save humanity from all suffering. This might seem like a contradiction in his character, but in actuality gives him more nuanced depth. All he's ever wanted was to keep the promise he made to Shirley and become a hero to save the world. It wasn't a sense of selfless nobility or justice, it was a promise. And that's something many people misunderstand from his character. While many people might point towards Fate Zero only being a nihilistic story about tragedy, I don't believe this to be the main message. It's true that a lot of the good characters meet a tragic end, while villains seemingly live and die on their own terms. However, what we can learn and understand from Kiritsugu's journey is that one should never over-rely on their ideals, otherwise they will be the cause of your own downfall. If you only believe the world to be a cruel place, you'll end up losing all of your humanity and drown in a pit of sorrow, losing meaning altogether. You need to be critical and self-reflective, never believing that there is only one way forward. Find purpose in life, but make sure it's something you can realistically set. Aleczanxr expands on this theme even further in his video, The Heart of Fate Zero. Kiritsugu is a beautifully written character, and his tragic end makes his suffering throughout his life even more powerful and impactful. He doesn't just represent an ideology, but a flawed, multifaceted human being. He was, in a sense, a hero.
僕はね、正義の味方になりたいんだ。
Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you like what I make, then maybe hit that sub button so you can get notified of when I upload, which isn't that frequent as you may have noticed. I'm sorry this video took so long to make. With so much happening around the world right now, it was hard to find that consistent motivation, though I do want to be better with my upload schedule. Finally, I'd like to thank Bakuretsu for sponsoring this video. Bakuretsu is an online studio and clothing brand that specializes in minimalist anime-inspired streetwear. What makes them different from mainstream anime clothing is their subtle yet aesthetically pleasing designs, so you can both be fashionable and rep your favorite show. My personal favorites from them are the Koi no Katachi and K-On! Designs, which you'll know I'll be getting. Bakuretsu ships internationally and for an affordable price. For a limited time, you can use the promo code KEVNYA to get $3 off your first order, which is 10% by the way for all you non-math majors. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time.